Chapter 40, Chapter 35. The next morning Eliza came down the stairs to three things, well, four technically, but Sirius and Remus were more of a matching set in her mind at this point. In front of Sirius and Remus were plates of pancakes, and on the table, in the middle, was this morning's issue of the Daily Prophet. Mass Azkaban breakout by Rita Skeeter in the late hours of last night. A crime was committed in the likes we haven't seen in decades. 16 known Death Eaters escaped from Azkaban, including the Lestranges. Bellatrix, Rodolphus, and Rabastion sentenced for their attacks on the Longbottoms. Roll, Avery, Rosier, and the Caro twins were also among those broken out of Azkaban last night. Thaddeus Knott was found dead in his cell on the same floor as the other escapees, cause of death unknown. When the Aurors returned this morning, they found several bodies on the grounds outside the prison thought to be members of the known vigilante group Order of the Phoenix. Their identities have yet to be confirmed, and no one knows why they were at the scene of the crime. The Aurors confirmed that they were attacked when they first arrived at Azkaban. Were the Order involved in this attack, and if so, who were they attacking? Minister Fudge has refused to comment, as has Albus Dumbledore, no leader of the Order of the Phoenix. What happened to the Dementors supposed to be guarding the prison? Where are these ex-Death Eaters now, and how did they escape? How were the Order of the Phoenix involved in the crimes? Was this perhaps a revenge killing gone wrong, or something far more sinister? And why, in our time of need, has our minister refused to speak to the public he has sworn to protect? This has been Rita Skeeter, bringing the truth to you. Well, Eliza said, setting the paper down onto the table, I assume you have some questions. Yeah, Sirius bit out. Why did you let my mad batshit cousin go free? Well, at least he wasn't angry about the whole murder business. Eliza could work with that. Death Eaters fall under Tom's jurisdiction. I only went along for the fun. Remus winced. Perhaps fun hadn't been a good choice of wording on her part. And a bit of revenge as well, he said lightly, and jabbed a finger at the paper. I doubt Thaddeus Knott dropped dead of his own accord. Eliza didn't even pretend to be repentant. He was horrible to Theo, and a horrible person in general. I'm glad he's dead. Okay, Remus said lightly and took a sip of his tea. Eliza had honestly been expecting more explosive reactions than this, but she supposed Sirius and Remus were no strangers to war. They must have killed a few people in their time as well. You're still grounded, Remus said, and Eliza choked on her pancake. What? Why? Remus floundered, but Sirius came to his rescue for engaging in criminal behavior. Remind me, who's the convict here again? Ex-convict, thank you very much. Sorry, who was it who was going to kill Peter Pettigrew again? Those were extenuating circumstances. Sirius protested, and Eliza desperately tried to clamp down on the smirk that threatened to overtake her face. And what were those circumstances? Sirius' reply was cut off when Remus jumped in, clearly exasperated. Honestly, it's just because there's going to be an impromptu order meeting here in an hour, and I'm scared over what will happen if you're in the same room as the whole order. Eliza tried to plaster an innocent expression on her face, but Remus didn't budge. Ah, fine, Eliza said, rolling her eyes. I'm not staying in, though. I have to pick up Tom's present, and I promised I'd go round to Draco's for lunch today. Remus and Sirius exchanged a glance then, and Eliza watched as they seemingly communicated silently with one another before they both let out identical sighs. Do you promise not to try and sneak in on the order meeting? Of course I won't, Eliza responded with a shake of her head. They wouldn't say as much if I was in the room. She finished walking out the kitchen to grab her leather jacket. Will you be back for tea? Remus called out as Eliza pulled on her shoes, lacing them up quickly. Be back about 5, Eliza asked and tucked her spare wand into her pocket. Be careful, Sirius warned, and Eliza rolled her eyes good-naturedly. When am I not? Before she left, she heard Sirius and Remus' voices echoing from the kitchen. I told you wouldn't be able to ground her. I'll bloody ground you. She really did love her family. When she returned home, it was already dark out. The Christmas lights were still all strung up around the street, and Eliza was just glad it hadn't started snowing yet. Muggle London could be quite picturesque in the holiday season, but Eliza really despised snow. I'm home, Eliza called out once she was past Walburga Black's portrait and started heading towards the kitchen. Resting on the dining room table was a large bouquet, only it wasn't made of flowers. Instead, it was full of sugar quills, Eliza's favorite sweet. Picking up the note attached to it, Eliza smiled when she saw Theo's messy cursive resting on the page. Thank you. I love you too. TBN. Eliza folded the note back up carefully and plucked a sugar quill out of the bouquet before it was gently slapped out of her hand. You have to eat tea first, Sirius ordered, and with a pout Eliza put her sugar quill back. What happened with the order? Eliza asked curiously as she plunked herself down at the table, thanking Creature when he brought in the food. Nothing good, Remus grumbled, and Eliza rose her eyebrows at the uncharacteristic moodiness of the man. He got into a bit of a tiff with Marley. Eliza's eyebrows rose even further. Yes, well, Remus said somewhat stiffly. She should learn to not contribute her opinions once in a while. Sirius barked a laugh, and Eliza wished she'd stayed just to see Remus actually lose his cool for once in his life. Well, what else happened? Eliza asked, waving her fork spill. Come on. Dumbledore wants us to look into the movements of one Thomas Gaunt the night of the attack. Ah, shit. Remus didn't even chastise her on her language. Shit indeed. Emergency. Come quickly. Don't panic. Understandably, upon seeing those words, Eliza panicked. Eliza jumped out of bed and started to haphazardly get ready, shrugging into a jumper and a pair of jeans as she hopped about the room. She threw up her hair into a messy bun as she searched for a pair of socks and stumbled out of the room, grabbing her leather jacket off the coat peg as she went. Jumping slightly, Eliza pulled herself up onto the banister of the staircase and started sliding down it. Whoa! Sirius yelped as she almost bowled him over at the bottom of the stairs. What's the rush, pup? Said there was an emergency. Eliza shouted over her shoulder, shoving her feet into her combat boots that she kept by the flue. I don't know when I'll be back. I'll send a patroness. Eliza grabbed a handful of flue powder down and threw it down into the flames, Riddle manner. She didn't even stumble when she came through on the other side. Whirling around, Eliza breathed a sigh of relief when she spotted Tom in front of her looking unharmed. What happened? Eliza demanded. Are you okay? Are you hurt? Tom blinked slowly in response before quirking an eyebrow. You said there was an emergency, Eliza said, glaring at him as understanding crossed his face. Ah, yes, a political one. If Eliza knew he wouldn't curse her before she could slap him, she really would do it one of these days. Sighing again, but this time in exasperation, Eliza gestured towards the open door that would lead to Tom's office. Shall we then? Tom stared at her for a few more seconds before he followed her lead and began walking into his surprisingly cozy office. Dumbledore wants to start spying on Thomas Gaunt, by the way, Eliza added in as Tom shut the door behind him. A pained expression flitted across his face as he came to join her at his desk. Oh, believe me, I know. Little speaker. Eliza turned and tried to locate where the hissing was coming from when she spotted Nagini by the open window, basking in the sun. Tell my master he needs to sleep. He stopped listening to me. Eliza laughed softly at Nagini's mothering. You heard her, Tom. You need to sleep, Tom sighed. If only I had the luxury. Eliza laughed again as Nagini let out a fussy little hiss and turned her head away from Tom in a huff. So what's the political emergency? Eliza questioned. Tom sighed heavily and folded his hands in front of him as he met her eyes. It's an update on the Umbridge case. Eliza was starting to have a bad feeling about this. Minister Fudge has decided to hold the Wisengamot hostage. What? I'm sorry, what? Tom pinched his nose and grimaced slightly. 4 days from now, Umbridge was supposed to be held on trial in front of the Wisengamot before you returned to school. Fudge, to put it lightly, is not happy about that. The elections happen next year, and with the Azkaban breakout, his reputation has just taken a rather large hit. If the world found out that his own undersecretary was undermining his law, endangering students, he'd lose all power and standing he has, and he knows it. He's a desperate man, and desperate men are dangerous. Eliza finished heavily. But what can he possibly do? We have evidence. The trial is going forward. He knows you. He knows your allies. I would never say Fudge is a smart man, but he knows where he stands, and he knows all the traditionalists on the Wisengamot are going to be backing you. He's going to lose all his support, and when they call a vote to vote him out of office, no one will stop it. Yes, Eliza said impatiently. We knew all of this. It was one of the reasons we went through with it. We never counted on him fighting back. Tom finished heavily, and Eliza blinked at him in confusion. What can he even do? Many traditionalists will back you. Yes, we've been over this. but many traditionalists also supported me back in the day. A lot of them were never caught, but Fudge is obviously privy to a lot of information. Tom explained tightly, and he's threatening to bring that information to the papers, namely the fact that even though half of the Wisengamot were suspected death, none of them were ever trialed with veritaseum. But that would cause a huge public outcry, one so large that it would be impossible to ignore the demands for a retrial. All your supporters in the Wisengamot would be stripped of their titles. Eliza breathed with a growing horror. We'd lose all the support and momentum we've been gaining. Dumbledore would probably be reappointed in a time of crisis, and Fudge would be a hero of the people and be voted back in for uncovering such a nefarious plot. The silence sat heavily around them. What does he want? Eliza asked quietly, and Tom ran a hand through his hair, which was already uncharacteristically mussed. He wants you to drop all charges against Umbridge. Eliza ran a hand down the side of her face and let out a soft curse. They had been so close. Eliza, we could still. No, Eliza cut Tom off sharply. We can't afford to lose all our progress just because of one toad. She hurt you, Tom pointed out, jaw clenching. Eliza nodded her head in acknowledgement, and I tried to deal with it civilly. I'm not a good person, but I owe it to Sirius and Remus to try to be. Eliza remarked heavily, and then waved her hands in a helpless gesture. I tried civil. It hasn't worked. I'll just have to find a different way to deal with her, Eliza said lightly, but she knew Tom wouldn't be fooled by her impassive facade. As long as you make it look like an accident, I don't really mind, Tom drawled and relaxed into his chair, some of the tension he had been carrying finally falling from him. You could just kill her for me, Eliza pointed out, trying to lighten the atmosphere. Although they both weren't unfamiliar with the biting bitterness of failure, it still irritated them both that they had managed to be foiled so easily. That's what most people didn't get about people like her and Tom. It wasn't that they were smart enough to never experience failure, it was that they failed time and time and time again. But they never stopped, time and time again, and deprive you of your fun little star. Tom quipped back with a hint of a smirk. I would never. I would eat the toad for you, little speaker, Nagini hissed from her spot in the sun. I don't have any rats to torment now. Eliza laughed quietly at that before letting the silence settle over them again. Tell Lucius to drop the charges. I'll get Rita to start a smear campaign against the minister using the Azkaban break-in. Fudge might have the Daily Prophet under his finger, but Rita won't be stopped so easily. It is a pain that Fudge can so easily control the papers. The only other wizarding paper is the Quibbler. Tom said scornfully, but Eliza frowned in thought. This wasn't the first time she had ran into problems with the Daily Prophet. If she didn't have Rita on her side, it would be a nightmare. But she might just have an idea on how to deal with it in the future. Anyway, Eliza said brightly, and stood up from her chair, ignoring Tom's watchful stare. I need to get home to Sirius. With the way I rushed out of the house, he probably thinks the ministry itself is falling. That worried about me, little star, Tom teased as he escorted her to the flue, and Eliza rolled her eyes. You're a hazard to society, Tom. Of course I worry. Whatever Tom's reply was going to be was cut off by a loud, irritating squeal from down the corridor. Eliza took an instant step back and drew her wand as a dark blur headed straight for Tom. My lord, the woman purred as she stopped beside Tom without a pout. Why did you leave us? Bellatrix Lestrange was in front of her. And not only that, but she was clinging onto Tom like a fucking barnacle. Her hands were rested on his chest as she threw herself at him with a coy smile. Leave the child and come back to us, Bellatrix simpered, mad eyes alight and eager, and Eliza found herself consumed by a horrible burning, jealously unlike anything she had experienced before. She wanted to break off Bellatrix's fingernails, one by one. Wanted to gouge out her eyeballs or pull out her teeth so she couldn't smile that stupid, deranged grin as she ran her hands all over Tom. Now, Bellatrix, Tom chided, and Eliza's fury spiked when he did nothing to remove their unwanted visitor. That isn't how we treat guests. Then who is this Eichel one, my lord? Bellatrix asked, and tilted her head, studying Eliza with a keen gaze. Eliza's hand tightened around her wand. Eliza Potter, heir to the most noble house of Potter, and most noble and most ancient house of Black, Eliza declared strongly and tilted her chin slightly. So I'd stop calling me a child if you knew what was best for you. She finished and watched as Bellatrix let out a sharp, grating laugh. Ooh, she knows how to play, don't you? Itty-bitty baby Potter. Eliza's hand twitched. Now Bellatrix. Eliza is the one who restored me to my former self, Tom said calmly, still not moving away from the psychotic Lestrin, who was clinging to him. Oh, well then, Bellatrix said brightly. I must thank her then, mustn't I? For returning my lord. Eliza didn't even realize she had cast the spell before Bellatrix leaped out of the way of it with a mad cackle. You think you can play with the grown-ups, little girl? She screeched. Then let's play. Bellatrix cast a crucio towards Eliza, but she deftly dodged out of the way and sent an entrails expelling curse back at the mad cow. Absently, she heard Tom let out an exasperated sigh, but she was too busy dodging another crucio to care. Eliza traded a few more volleys of spells with Bellatrix before she smirked viciously when she dodged another crucio. Not very creative, are you? Eliza taunted. I thought this was meant to be a challenge, she said, and cast a nasty curse she had found in Salazar's library that would reverse someone's skin until all their organs were on the outside of their body. Bellatrix let out a manic laugh before they both started dueling properly, trading hexes and curses back and forth. Bellatrix was tiring now. She had given up on the unforgivables and had now branched out, but Eliza was quicker, and she was also smarter. Eliza sent another volley of spells down the small corridor and smiled grimly when Bellatrix tried to deflect them all with a protego. Her first cutting hex was deflected, as was her stupefy, but sandwiched between those two spells had been another. A paralysis spell Eliza had cast in Parseltongue. It snuck past Bellatrix's shield, and the woman collapsed to the floor with a heavy thump. Eliza stalked towards the fallen woman and crouched down beneath her, fishing out a penknife and placing it close to Bellatrix's neck. I am not a child, Eliza said dangerously, and pressed the silver blade closer to Bellatrix's skin. Understood. Tom cleared his throat from somewhere behind her. Are you done now? He drawled, but Eliza could see amusement in his red-eyed stare. Eliza stood stiffly and let out a sniff. Well, that depends on her, doesn't it? Eliza said snidely, and Tom shook his head before casting the Parseltongue counter-curse. Bellatrix immediately leapt to her feet, and Eliza raised her wand when she saw the woman immediately dart towards her. However, much to her surprise, she felt herself be wrapped up in a hug. Oh, she's perfect, my lord, Bellatrix squealed, and Eliza jabbed the woman with her elbow to get out of her grip. You simply have to keep her around. With one last mad cackle, Bellatrix let Eliza go and merrily skipped off around the corner, wishing Eliza goodbye. She was talking to herself about little Potters and family gatherings, all of which made Eliza quite confused. She was so confused. Well then, Eliza said after what felt like a few minutes of silence, I should be heading home. Ah yes, Tom said in easy agreement. Your dog father will be getting worried, he said, wrinkling his nose slightly. Eliza nodded and started heading towards the flue, but stiffened when she heard Tom's voice call out behind her teasingly. Oh, and darling. Eliza turned slightly, and the second she saw Tom's lecherous smile, she knew she was in trouble. There's no need to be jealous of Bellatrix. She wasn't blushing. She wasn't. There's only one girl I've set my sight on after all. Eliza rushed to the flue with a mortified squeak, and when she fell out of the other side, she tumbled straight onto the floor, face burning bright red. Sirius and Remus turned to look at her in blatant amusement. Bloody dark lords, Eliza breathed, and Sirius, bark-like laughter echoed around the room. Between literally everything that had been happening over Eliza's Yule holiday, she wasn't surprised when New Year's Eve arrived impossibly quickly. She also wasn't surprised about how much Sirius was complaining. It's New Year's Eve, Eliza. He whined from his place on the sofa and Eliza sighed. And it's also Tom's birthday. He spent Yule alone. Are you really going to complain about me wanting to spend his birthday with him? I'm alone. Thanks, Sirius. Nice to know I'm wanted. Remus chimed in without missing a beat, and Eliza had to muffle her laughter. I've already booked the tickets, okay? Eliza said and fished the 2 theater tickets out of her clutch as evidence. And I'm meeting Tom in less than 20 minutes. You've picked a rather inconvenient time to try and stop me from leaving. It's all right, Eliza, Remus said gently. I'll keep Sirius company. Just don't stay out too late, okay? Eliza nodded in agreement, shooting a smile at Remus as she pulled on her leather jacket. She and Tom would be in the Muggle world tonight, so Eliza didn't have to worry about wizarding fashion. Instead, she had found a dress at the back of her wardrobe that Daphne had deemed far too scandalous to be worn at any of the high society functions Eliza attended it. It was a strapless grey dress that only came to above her knees. The bodice was decorated with lace that travelled down the sides of the dress as it flared out about her. She had paired it with some red high heels she had found in Muggle London that laced up her legs. If she had worn it to the Yule Ball, she would have scandalized everyone. Thankfully, Muggle London was much different territory. Slipping her wand into her purse, Merlin bless extension charms, and double-checking she had the tickets, Eliza slipped out of Grimmauld Place and started heading for the nearest tube station. Just because she was now a part of the wizarding world didn't mean she had forgotten how to navigate Muggle London. She had told Tom to meet her in front of the Royal Albert Theatre at 7, although she had yet to tell him what for, only that he should wear some semi-formal Muggle clothes. When Eliza used to talk to the diadem that now sat on her bedroom shelf courtesy of Tom's latest Yule gift, he confessed to her that he was quite fond of operas, concertos, and the like. Now that she knew about Tom's love for the piano, it made quite a bit more sense. In passing, the diadem had mentioned one of his favorites, and it just so happened to be having a showing at the Royal Albert tonight. She just hoped that Tom would enjoy it. Eliza's heels clattered against the pavement as she finally rounded the corner and immediately spotted Tom amongst the crowd. He was leaning against the wall seemingly without a care in the world and not noticing the stares he was gaining from the random muggles around them. It didn't take too long for him to spot her, and Eliza felt a flash of satisfaction when she saw his eyes widen slightly. Payback for flustering her the other day. She watched as Tom straightened up his blazer and started walking towards her through the crowd until they both came to a stop. "You look beautiful, little star," Tom said smoothly, and even though Eliza knew it didn't mean anything, she still felt her lungs tighten all the same. That was the thing with Tom. He was charming and a flirt, had been as long as Eliza has known him, but at the end of the day, she knew it didn't mean anything to him. But she wasn't going to mope over her crush tonight. "Do I finally get to find out where exactly we're going tonight?" Eliza smiled mischievously and then pulled out the 2 tickets for the night's showing and handed one to Tom. He frowned slightly when he took the ticket, but then unabashed amazement crossed his face as he glanced back up at that. "You remembered. You did tell me it was your favorite," Eliza said softly, and then grabbed his hand, intending to pull him along behind her if he didn't move soon. "Now come on, birthday boy. I got us some top box seats." Tom let out a warm, happy laugh and fell into step beside her as they joined the queue. "I have to say, little star, I didn't expect anything like this. I'm a girl of many talents," Eliza said back with a grin and handed their tickets over to the attendant. "That you are," Tom murmured softly, seemingly without noticing. Eliza smiled and thanked the attendant as they directed the pair of them to their seats. The Royal Albert Hall truly was an amazing sight, and Eliza was more than a bit smug that she had managed to get them the top box seats. The chairs were red and plush, and the orchestra was right below them. Tom peered over the edge curiously, and Eliza smiled softly at the undisguised excitement. It was rare that Tom looked so overtly happy. Smug, arrogant, prideful, he often sported a look of malicious glee or a teasing smirk, but undisguised happiness was still rare. "Are you also paying for the drinks tonight, darling?" Tom asked, leaning back into his chair. "Well, that depends," Eliza drawled. "Are you going to let me have a glass with you this time, or—" Tom pretended to debate the question for a few moments before he gave an elegant shrug. "Who am I to stop you?" Eliza snorted slightly, but got up from her seat all the same and started making her way towards the bar before the show started. Eliza herself wasn't a fan of classical music. She much preferred the jazz Tom had introduced her to, or even the old punk music Sirius loved to play on their old record player. But this was for Tom's birthday. Merlin knows he deserved a break occasionally. Eliza leant against the bar, and after one small, wandless carpenter's charm later, she was being served by an overly helpful bartender. Eliza had just placed her order when she felt a presence behind her. "And what's a pretty thing like you doing here all alone?" A man leered next to her with a thick Cockney accent. Eliza knew his type: fancy suit, expensive watch, and a complete dick. "I'm not alone, and I'm also not interested," Eliza said coolly, and started tapping her fingers against the bar as she waited for the bartender to come back with their drinks. "No need to be like that, love," the man said defensively, but the leering smirk had yet to leave his face. "I was just making some friendly conversation. Can't fault a guy for trying right." "I think you'll find she can actually." A smooth voice cut in behind them, and Eliza felt herself relax slightly as Tom made an appearance. "And who are you?" the man sneered, jabbing his finger towards Tom. Quicker than she could track, Tom reached out and grabbed the man's finger, twisting it painfully. Now, mate, we're all friends here." The man stuttered out through the pain, and Eliza shifted slightly so she was closer to Tom, who had titled his head in a way that could only mean danger. "I thought you were waiting in our box," Eliza asked, and smothered smile when she saw how intently Tom was glaring at the other man. "You were taking too long," Tom said idly, not letting up on his murderous stare. "Now I suggest you move along, mate," he said dangerously, letting go of the man's finger and placing a possessive hand on Eliza's arm instead. Was he jealous? The man paled and moved away instantly, trotting back to wherever he had come from when the bartender finally brought back Eliza's drinks. Tom picked up the tray smoothly and started heading back to their box as Eliza grinned smugly beside him. She wouldn't say anything to the possessive prat, but she would definitely remember this incident the next time he tried to call her jealous. They returned to their box just as the lights started going down. She and Tom settled into their seats, and Tom poured them both a glass of red wine with a grin. And then the music started. The violins began with slow, rich notes that echoed through the whole building, and Eliza felt her heart pound. But it wasn't because of the music. No, it was because Tom's hand was resting on top of hers, and that's where it stayed the full night. The last note rang across the theater, and everyone around them burst into thunderous applause. Tom hadn't taken his eyes off the stage for a second, and Eliza had enjoyed watching him listen to the music, completely enthralled by the sweeping orchestra. "Little star, you have truly outdone yourself," Tom said with a pleased smile, and Eliza grinned. "Who says that we're done?" she teased, and Tom's eyes narrowed in confusion. "I did say I had many skills, and breaking and entering is among them." Tom's confused face was priceless. Eliza took out her wand and murmured a small incantation and turned to look at Tom with a bright smile. Everyone in this building is suddenly going to remember they have urgent business elsewhere. And in their haste to leave, they're going to forget to put away that rather lovely grand piano on stage. She continued as Tom's eyes widened. "I don't know about you, but I think it would be a shame to waste such an opportunity," Eliza said innocently. A large, boyish grin split across Tom's face, and in the space of a blink, he had leapt up from his seat and grabbed Eliza by the arm, apparating them onto the stage. He looked around the huge theater with something akin to awe before he settled down on the piano stool, fingers spread across the keys almost reverently as he started to play. It wasn't the same song as last time, a melody she had never forgotten, but rather something new. He played a low note first, angry and harsh before he built on the melody, slipping into it straight away as the dark and low music echoed around them before it became lighter, more hopeful. Eliza couldn't take her eyes off him as he played and played. It felt like he was creating stories out of thin air, and she was completely enraptured. He didn't stop playing. His hands flew across the keys, and she was sure he himself didn't realize how long they had sat in the empty Albert Hall as he seemingly poured his heart out into the music and the empty theater. He moved from classical to jazz to anything else that struck his fancy, and she could only watch in awe. Tom was a murderer. He was a killer and a sadist. He wasn't a good person, nowhere near it. He caused trouble and chaos, and he had an ego larger than the entire theater itself. Most would say he was a monster, but here now, he was just a man. Just a boy in front of a piano who one day decided that he would change the world and wouldn't let up until he did. In fairy tales, the prince always had to slay the monster. They never told you that sometimes they could be one in the same. She knew that they were not the stuff of fairy tales, but was a happy ever after truly so far from their reach. One last note rang out across the theater, and Tom finally moved his hands away from the keys with a warm, tender smile that Eliza felt like she had no right in seeing. I can't believe I've played at the Royal Albert, he said softly with a wry smile. Something ticked off your bucket list. Eliza teased slightly, and Tom exhaled sharply with a shake of his head. Sometimes, little star. You know me so well that it's scary, he said heavily, red eyes meeting her own. Do you know what else I know? Tom rose his eyebrows in question. I know that I'm absolute starving. She joked successfully, breaking the odd tension. Come on, you can treat me to dinner considering I've just treated you to the best birthday ever. So modest, little star, Tom said with a crooked grin as he stood up from the stool. Don't be bitter just because I'm better. I will make you pay for your own food. How about an Italian? Eliza asked, ignoring his threat, as they sneaked out of the theatre and out onto the London streets, the cold air surrounding them. What if I don't want an Italian? Tom argued just for the sake of arguing, and they continued to argue all the way down the street. They did end up getting an Italian, and Tom did end up paying. Eliza giggled as Tom told her about the time he accidentally started a bar fight in Moscow as they wandered down the street. Tom, ever the gentleman, had promised to walk her home after their meal. They were back on her street now, the door of Grimald a few meters away as they walked beneath the streetlights until they stopped on her doorstep. Thank you, Eliza, Tom murmured softly, his ruby-red eyes meeting hers, and Eliza titled her head up so she could smile at him. It was my pleasure, she said softly in response, and the silence settled around them again. Eliza couldn't look away from Tom's eyes, and he moved in closer. Eliza oddly felt like they were both waiting for something, stood on the edge of a precipice. What are you thinking about, little star? He asked lowly, and Eliza could count his individual eyelashes. He was that close to her. Maybe it was the wine, maybe it was the excitement in the air, and the faint sounds of a countdown in the distance as they headed for the new year. Maybe it was the fact that this almost felt like it had been a lifetime coming, or maybe it was just the fact that Tom looked so damn handsome tonight. But I'm thinking, Eliza said in a voice barely above a whisper, about how much I would like to kiss you right now. Tom's ruby-red eyes darkened as he leaned in impossibly closer. Eliza's eyes fluttered close as she felt his warm breath fan across her face. Really, Eliza? Then what's stopping you? Eliza's the first one to move. It's a tiny movement. Just a small tilt of her chin so her lips finally brush against Tom's. It felt like worlds collided and everything boiled down to this moment. To Tom's mouth, the press of his lips, his hands in her hair, but it wasn't enough. Eliza had never wanted anything more in her life, and she found herself leaning into Tom even more, demanding and insistent as she moved her mouth against his, and his palm came to rest on her cheek. He pulled away slowly, and when Eliza opened her eyes, her breath hitched. She had never seen that look in Tom's eyes before. It made her skin burn. Slowly and tender in a way that a man with blood on his hands had no right in being, he brushed his thumbs softly over her still parted lips. Big Ben struck midnight, and the fireworks lit up the London sky. Happy New Year, Eliza, he said, lips curling into a small smile. She didn't get to respond before he apparated away, a faint blush on his cheeks. Eliza grinned, pressing a hand to her lips, and watched the fireworks. Happy New Year indeed.